Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of America UnCanceled on CPAC Now. All eyes are on Washington, D.C. as the news coming out of our nation's capital, mostly bad news, is getting everyone's attention. We're in the middle of this most interesting of presidential campaigns, and the American people are making judgments about this new Republican majority we have in the House of Representatives. So who better to talk to as one of the most important members of that Republican majority, but Congressman Burgess Owens. Congressman, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Look forward to chatting with you, my friend. Absolutely.
You as well, and thanks for being at CPAC in the past and for all your great work in Congress. Let's start with kind of how I opened this up. You and I were chit-chatting before we started the show. What's it like? What's the difference between being in the majority and kind of like suffering in the minority?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, it's a world of difference. There's no more total need of just message bills. You can put bills in place or at least bring things to people's attention that really makes a difference to them. I think the most important thing, though, Matt, is where we are now. We've had the last two Congresses that I would say have been very exciting to me. We're finally bringing people to Congress that really care about why they're there. They're there because we see we're about to head off the edge of this of our country, and we don't want that to happen. So they're there for the right reasons. And because of that, you have folks like myself who never thought about being in politics that are saying maybe I can make a small difference just by bringing another voice. And the last two classes, I would say, have really done a good job of representing that. So what we have now, just think about this. We're only 7 months in, and all this information is coming out across the board in every facet of what's been going on in our country that we just didn't know. So the fact that the American people, even though it's only a 5-seat majority, they gave us a majority. That's the miracle of what we're dealing with now. And by the way, that majority came from blue states, blue districts, which is amazing when you think about it, the 5-seat majority. So we're doing things now where we're beginning to educate the American people. And I'll say this, Matt, I believe this, we kind of live in this freedom bubble that we want to dream about the things we want to get done in our retirement, our kids, and we think about that, forgetting that there's evil at our doorsteps at every single way, every single point. And now the American people have woken up to that. And now that we're talking, both sides and I, we're talking about how to deal with this. I think we're on our way, inching our way back to getting our freedoms that we've lost over time.
Okay, so you brought up the word evil, which seems to be unfortunately a theme of what's going on in our culture, in our government, and in society. Recently, CPAC announced the creation of a center to combat human trafficking, and CPAC might be relatively new to this very important fight against really evil people and evil actions, but you're not new to it. You've been battling this in the halls of Congress and before you got to Congress. Tell us why this issue is important to your heart and what you're up to try to combat it.
And I appreciate that question. It's interesting because when I first started this process, one of my platforms was anti-trafficking. And I think we need to understand kind of where we are. We started as a country, the Judeo-Christian country, a foundation of God, faith, family, the free market. That's who we were. We're now at an age where we're wondering if our parents and our parents' parents would ever think that we're at this point that we are today, where literally thousands and hundreds of thousands of children are being used and abused, and yet we have a great part of our country that could care less. We have somewhere between 80 to 100,000 unaccompanied children that came through our border over the last couple of years, and 6% of them we have no idea where they are. And we have this ideology that believes it's okay to take advantage of the most innocent, and we unfortunately have a disintegration of our family unit. You have to wonder, where are the dads? I mean, where are they now to protect these children? Where are the mothers? So we're at a point now where it's a reflection that we have to make sure we're getting back to our basic roots to become a more perfect union, which means we have to recognize evil for what it is. I'll say this: we have a Congress right now that is very aware. I'm excited about some of the things we're doing, some of the bills I've been able to co-sponsor. The fact that we now have this movie that just came out, Sound of Freedom, very recently, will allow people to realize it is a real problem. You might not hear about it on ABC, NBC, the rest of them, you're not going to. This is happening in the dark, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our most innocent. So I'm excited about being part of that. I'm excited, to be honest with you, to be part of a party It's always been about protecting our innocent from the very beginning. That's how we begin, and we are leading again in that regard. And we're going to make sure that we expose this for what it is. Find out ways that we can, if there's any linkage at all with federal government, if there's any money going to nonprofits that are part of this process, we need to find out who they are, and we're going to start defunding, doing the things we can do here, and of course starting to put those perpetrators that are dealing with this, put them away. So we need to deal with both sides of it.
So one of the things we're going to do with our new center to combat human trafficking, I think one of the big mistakes in the conservative movement, maybe generally, is people see an issue that's hot, and this movie has helped make this issue be more potent politically, and everybody kind of jumps on the issue. And we actually came to this issue a different way. It's because of our travels overseas with these CPACs we do overseas. We've stumbled across these victims and the heroic people that are trying to save their lives, and it made my wife Mercy say, "Hey, we gotta get involved in this." But even then, I wouldn't have approved the creation of this center if I didn't think we had something unique about CPAC that could play a role. And obviously, we're seen as very conservative and very partisan. So that's not necessarily a positive thing on a question like human trafficking. But what is positive is we have the gold standard of congressional and legislative ratings, and we want to use that tool to try to help legislators understand the legislation that has to be passed, not just at the national level, of which you have several examples of pieces of legislation that you're pushing, but also at the state level, so that we can pass the right laws. You haven't been able to pass these laws yet. Are you hopeful we can see a change?
I am. Again, part of this is getting a majority so we can start having these kind of conversations. The other part is recognizing that every one of us can play a part. And sometimes it seems to be so overwhelming that we don't know what we can personally do. And there's many ways of doing it. Number one, there's ways of educating ourselves to be able to recognize trafficking. It can be so subtle at times. It's being able to not only recognize it, it's being able to make sure you're congressman people. And I appreciate what you're doing, because when you're looking at a ranking, a rating, then that becomes a very high priority for folks that are trying to show that they do have these conservative values. So it's an all-in process. And I'll just say this. Our culture has always been defined on how we view our kids. It always has been. From the very beginning, the Pilgrims came over because they wanted to make sure their kids were growing up in an environment that they weren't losing this religious understanding that they had. It's always been a legacy. What do we pass down to our children? Once we make that disconnect, which is unfortunately happening in our country today, when we see surgery on kids as young as third and fourth grade, when you see drags in front of children and being sexualized, there's becoming a disconnect between adults and their kids, and we cannot hold on to our culture if we allow that to happen. So we have to stand boldly and not back down on this, and realize this is the fight of our future we're going through right now. And I tell you, all I have to do is lean back on my parents' generation. They were solid. They taught us what it was to respect all the things that we now are trying to fight for. So just know that this is one of the biggest fights we can have wherever you stand, whether it be funding, whether it be educating yourself, whether it be showing up to different events. We need to be all in at this point, all in the field, because this is one of the most important battles we can have, and that is the future of our children.
So I brought up this idea that there's got to be some areas that are bipartisan or nonpartisan. It used to be national defense and support of the military, support of cops. All that's been politicized, and there's shirts and skins and red and blue when it comes to those issues. We do a lot of work on criminal justice reform. It seems like good people on the left and the right can come together on those sets of issues of the over incarceration of our youth, et cetera, in this country. Is human trafficking one of those areas? And this is something you can really help the audience understand, because you're there in the halls of Congress. Are there Democrats who we might have a different view on the border and these very fundamental questions which we have to tackle, but do they still have a heart to try to work with Burgess Owens to make sure we can pass legislation to stop this barbaric practice, or is it very partisan as well?
No, absolutely. I think you just nailed it. There's so many things that we used to be able to say we can come together on. It used to be our flag, it used to be our teams. One thing that we still have in common, and that's our children. Of course, we have some that are just so far out they're missing the point. But on the most part, you have a lot of good people on both sides of the aisle that says, don't mess with my kids. Whether that be in the classroom, whether it be the fact we don't feel safely to take our kids out to certain areas. So a lot of it just comes down to education. When I think it goes from sympathy to empathy. There's a difference. Empathy is when we really get our heart into it. We want to make sure we come up with solutions. Sympathy is when we feel sorry for people and just move on. We're now, you think about what's happening at the border with the drug things. Now we're having more empathy because people realize how close that is. This is one of those areas that the more we're educated, the more we know that it could be our child, literally. It could be taken. It could be our child because all the stuff that's coming through and the exposure our kids are having, the sexualization that's going on right now. So yes, I think this is one area that we will probably cement it better than any place else because we love our children no matter what our ideology might be. We just need to figure out how to come together to protect them in the best ways we can. Part of what we're doing right now, Matt, is a big piece of it. I think the biggest problem we've had over the years, and I'll say this for Utah, we're very naive. We just kind of think it can never happen here. It can never happen on my street. Right. And so we just kind of think it as a distance. So the more we begin to recognize this evil perpetrates any place that there's light, any place could be, but that you feel you're safe, that you feel that nothing, that's when they really kind of come after you. So the more we understand that, the more we have these kind of conversations, the more we're able to make it a priority and go for it.
Help us understand, like for instance, on your legislation, are Democrats willing to co-sponsor it? We had a conference on human trafficking, and a more moderate Democrat House member was supposed to show up. He didn't. I don't want to use his name because he might have had a true scheduling conflict. But like, are there names that you can mention of Democrats who really that you can call and you're working on this issue, or are you close to that point?
I think we're close to that point, and this is really what really has to happen. I think the way we're going to end up having more bipartisanship is for the American people to really stand up and say we've had enough of this truly anti-American sentiment that's coming from the hard left. I think what's happening, again, this is only my second term, but I think we had in place a leadership that was just bullies to so many of our colleagues across the aisle. They could not step out of lane. And they have to now have a little bit more courage. I believe what's going to happen is we come into this next term, bring more people on that have more courage to talk about these issues that we should have in common, even though we might disagree on other things. This is one of them. And so I'm looking forward to actually having these conversations, digging in more and deeper. The Sound of Freedom, that movie came out, has been able to kind of elevate this a little bit more. So it's not just a conversation having one-on-one. It's more of a group conversation we can now have with more of our colleagues. So I'm hopeful. And again, it's one of the things that if this particular Congress cannot get it done bipartisan, it's going to be up to we the people to make sure that we get people on board that understands this is a priority for all of us.
I was just traveling recently with my wife, and I found myself being much more cognizant within the airport and overseas, watching children with adults. And I guess I always had the assumption of every child is with an aunt, with an uncle, with a parent. And there are strange moments when you see a kid with an adult, and it makes you wonder, hey, I wonder if that kid is really related to that adult, or, are they, traveling against their will, essentially. These are the little things that all of us can do. As I said, we've happened upon this issue through our CPAC travels overseas. For yourself, what made you get turned on to trying to help here? Was it you knew a victim? Was it you saw the weakness of the law? What got you into the fight?
That's a great question. You know what it is? I was taught my history about slavery. I was taught about what happened to my particular race. I was also taught about how we overcame that and became such a prominent and key role of building our nation. But when you've understood that, then you become kind of sensitive to it. And I happen to have also one of my daughters, my oldest, was a flight attendant. And she got really involved with this. It was actually a little bit after she left, she recognized that there was probably one of these young people that she recognized, that she looked back, was probably being trafficked. But now it's too late. But she can now, with her lessons, what she's learned, she could probably recognize that. I think the biggest part of this is to first of all recognize as a country that this is a problem. It's just not a one-off. We have literally thousands of young people who are unaccounted for, that are being used and abused. And as long as we can see that and then take the time to educate ourselves, there are programs out there to help you educate yourself on what to look for. I was excited about what the trucking industry has done. They've actually put little hints of how to. Internally they train the truckers what to look for and how to identify. And there's a number they call if they see anything that might be suspicious. So if we can do that from a ground up, individually, take the time to see what can I do to make sure I'm aware. What if it's my child? If you take that approach, then I think we can begin to expose this for what it is. And the most important thing is to put these criminals, these evil actors away for good. We need to really look at making sure that the fines, the accountability is such that nobody ever wants to play in this area.
What I learned from the conference, and there was a lot of wonderful Mexican officials and activists who were at the Capitol. I learned a couple things. Number one, it's like what you talked about with your daughter, who was the flight attendant, training people who have interaction with people who are traveling or people who are with kids, training them to see the signs of what a victim might be doing or saying, or what doesn't. What do they say? If you see something, say something. In the airports also comes true. If you see a child in a situation that just doesn't seem right to you, there are steps you can take to make sure that the right people can intervene. The other thing is, they're the victims, and these are sexual victims at tender ages. And in a sense, sometimes the laws make it very hard for them to figure out a way to get back away from the perpetrators, because they're considered criminals by these laws as well. And so we got to make sure that's not something that prevents them from getting out of bondage, because this is essentially slavery. So we have to look at those laws. Why are we punishing the young victims, the sexual victims of this terrible practice? And then the third thing is what you just said. There are times when our laws are stupidly tough on nonviolent people, but then there are way too many instances where our laws are way too soft on hardened criminals. I can't imagine a worse criminal than somebody who would abduct a child and sell him into a life of prostitution. I can't even think of a too harsh penalty for them.
Well, normally, even in the prison system, those are folks that are dealt with in a very proper, appropriate way.
I know what you're saying.
But it's interesting, because one of the bills I put together, and we're actually trying to push it through right now, is called the Survivors Relief Act. To the point just made, we have to recognize there are the perpetrators and there are the victims, and there are people literally have to go through this and live with it for the rest of their lives, and they should do everything we can do to give them a second chance. Part of this is to expunge. If you have a record of nonviolence, that they were brought into this and are trying to make others get a start, why should they be punished for the rest of their lives for something they really didn't want anything to do with? So we're looking at ways of expunging the records for those nonviolent that have been pulled into this and give them that second chance. Here in Utah, we were able to appropriate some funding for a facility that allowed those victims to come and kind of I'm going to use the word detox, but just to kind of get back to a normal process of getting their lives in place and moving forward from that point. So there are different ways of doing it. I will say this to the point of the Congress we have right now. I truly believe that we have innovative legislators now, folks that are coming to the plate that really want to figure out how to think outside the box. How do we disrupt the things that have been happening for quite a while? And what that comes down to, as long as we understand from those who are innovating, those who are trying to figure out these solutions, what that looks like, so we can work with them and give them a runway to go out and do what they do best without the regulations, without the stops that come through bureaucracy. So if we can connect our innovative legislators to those innovators out there, those free market ideas, those out of box ideas, come to us so we can understand what that looks like, so we can together work on making sure we're putting as many of our kids in safety as possible, helping them to transition out of it as possible, and never to be caught in it if we can identify these situations.
Well, Congressman Burgess Owens, we're going to be working with you, and we want to help you with this important legislation that you're working on. We'll continue to educate people in our CPAC community in ways they can help by getting more of your colleagues to sign on to your legislation. Let's get some of these Democrats to be public in support as well. And there'll be some more partisan solutions too. Like we got to fix this border problem, because the border isn't just about the Democrats trying to get a bunch of people to vote illegally for their candidates. It's also just about kids being victimized and drugs coming over and cartels being empowered. So there's a lot of issues to unpack there that we have to solve. So we appreciate everything you're doing, sir.
Well, Matt, let's just leave with this. I'm the chair of the higher education subcommittee, and part of that higher education and workforce, this kind of has oversight over that. And so we're looking at every kind of way that we can to work with, to collaborate with folks who really want to make a difference here. So I look forward to literally spending time to understand what you guys are doing and how we can possibly on our side help to legislate to make it even a better process, or give the more strength to what you're trying to get accomplished. So I appreciate your efforts in a big way.
Well, good luck to you, sir. And we appreciate everybody tuning in to another episode of America UnCanceled. As you know, we're also on podcasts, so go download episodes of America UnCanceled wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more information on our Center for Combating Human Terrorism, simply go to our website at cpac.org. You can get all the information on all the ways you can add your important voice to the important pieces of legislation. For instance, the legislation that Congressman Owens has just talked with us about. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back at you soon.